It will actually reduce the deficit by $4 trillion over the long term. Reducing the waste and inefficiency in Medicare and Medicaid will pay for most of this plan. It will slow the growth of healthcare costs for our families, our businesses, and our government. There will be a provision in this plan that requires us to come forward with more spending cuts if the savings we promised don't materialize.
Much later.
I owe you an answer on why it is I'm standing here today asking to extend something that was temporary. And here's the reason. We did fail to bring down the cost of health care.
All right, guys, so we've had a interesting day. The Democrats came out with some ridiculous proposal. It took us about 0.3 seconds to say no deal. What they're offering wasn't even a real proposal, and they know it. And once again, it is proven that they are not interested in opening the government. We just now had an opportunity for them to at least pay essential employees and all the essential programs. Guess what? Nope, they all said no. Why? Because it's politics. You can't make sense out of what they're doing right now because they got Chucky Schumer leading them in this political fight. Once again, guys, we're still here fighting every single day. It's a privilege, and it's also frustrating at sometimes. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to fight for the great state of Oklahoma.
Boy. So another day, which means another video about the Democrat shutdown, okay, that they have orchestrated in order to please the radical left lunatics in their party, right? They are holding the country hostage because they don't want to lose their jobs to the radical left. And Democrats are fighting for a healthcare system that is literally making everybody's healthcare more expensive in this country. Okay, I want to remind people that Obamacare is the reason why your premiums are going up. Okay, and Democrats are simply just fighting to put a band-aid on a system that is massively corrupt in favor of insurance companies because you socialize the costs, you privatize the profits, and what you get is what we got right now, which is a complete and total disaster that's not even worth saving, to be honest with you guys.
Give you a quick update on the Senate hearing that was led by Ron Johnson today regarding the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. And there were several individuals who testified and basically kind of confirmed what I've already been telling all of you, is that the system, the exchanges, Affordable Care Act exchanges in each individual state has largely been rigged. And essentially what's happened, what has been incentivized by the Affordable Care Act is this consolidation of healthcare providers within the individual regions and in individual states. And what that means is a lot of hospitals that are owned by insurance companies went in and bought doctors. So it's the same doctor, it's just now that doctor is affiliated with a hospital and can charge a higher rate. And so because they can charge these higher rates, they have increased the cost of insurance. And worse yet, so if you go look at the ACA exchanges in any state, for example, in California, I was shopping around the ACA plans, you're going to see that most of the plans are garbage HMO plans, and there's a reason for that. So because they bought these providers and hospitals, they can package up basically these providers, call them in-network, and they're limited providers in a particular jurisdiction area of California, for example. And so they get to charge insane rates for the premiums. They own the doctors. You cannot go outside, typically outside of the network, to access any doctor. And so the coverage you're getting is basically, it's not the best coverage as if we were to have the open exchange. So if we were to have an open free market exchange, I think that would actually give us better access to doctors. And you got to keep in mind too, a lot of these doctors are not allowed to take cash pay patients. So that has also increased cost because in order to have a contract with a doctor in an insurance company and be considered in network, you have to agree to not take cash pay pay patients. And I think many of you are going to see these videos of cash pay doctors on social media who are offering their own sort of health coverage in a lot of respects because that is cheaper. And so when we hear of a lot of the rural hospitals in rural areas being decimated, it's decimated because of this Affordable Care Act system that we put in place and the consolidations by the hospitals, eating up and buying the providers and then pre-packaging those into garbage HMO insurance plans that are also that are owned by they own the hospitals, they own the providers now, and now they own the insurance that they're selling you these plans on. So anyways, it's unfortunate what we are having to deal with as far as access to healthcare right now. I don't know how that would be fixed. And so that's kind of what was the next step in the hearing, is how do we fix this? And those questions are largely unanswered right now.
Yeah, in my opinion, just my humble opinion, I think that the way that you fix it is that you dismantle Obamacare. You get rid of it, and I'm not saying that you get rid of it all at one time, but there has to be an off-ramp, okay, in order to get us back to a more free market-oriented healthcare system, right? Let's actually bring the free market back, because what we have right now is not the free market. It is socialism for big doctors, big hospitals, big insurance company, and big pharma, right? That is what it is, okay? That's the honest to God truth. Democrats are fighting on behalf of big companies, okay, to pad their profits off the backs of taxpayers in order to give people who don't want to work and illegal immigrants free healthcare that's not really free. And that continues to drive up the cost for everybody. And Democrats don't have a solution to this outside of a Band-Aid, right? And that is what the Obamacare subsidies that happened during COVID, that's what they were. They were a Band-Aid in order to hide the problem of Obamacare, which is that it is completely and totally unsustainable. So with that being said, Democrats are now magically back at the table, right? They're now back at the table and they're ready to negotiate opening up the government, as if there's anything to negotiate with these clowns. But they want to, quote unquote, negotiate, right? And we know that they orchestrated this shutdown. They orchestrated taking away people's food stamps. They orchestrated not paying the military. They orchestrated not paying our federal workers in order to motivate the far left lunatics to get out and vote, because they blamed it all on Trump, okay? And up until this point, I can't lie to you guys, they've won the optics battle when it comes to this, and I'm going to explain how the GOP can actually change this moving forward into the future. But they have essentially caused all of these problems. They're the ones that, again, created Obamacare. They're the ones that decided that the subsidies would run out, that they would be temporary. And again, they're doing this in order to have leverage over Republicans, right? That's what they're doing. They're using it as leverage. And they made it very clear that this is a political game that they're playing with people's lives, because the counteroffer to have the government open up that was presented by Chuck Schumer was a poison pill that no sane person would ever accept, because Chuck Schumer wants to open back up the government, but only if Republicans agree to extending the Obamacare subsidies by 1 year, right before the midterms. Take a look.
Reopens. Therefore, we'd like to offer a simple proposal that would reopen the government and extend the ACA premium tax credits simultaneously, and then have the opportunity to start negotiating longer-term solutions to health care costs. Let's do all three. I've spoken with my caucus, and Democrats are offering a very simple compromise. Democrats are ready to clear the way to quickly pass a government funding bill that includes health care affordability. Leader Thune just needs to add a clean 1-year extension of the ACA tax credits to the CR so that we can immediately address rising health care costs. That's not a negotiation. It's an extension of current law, something we do all the time around here, as we all know. But we also offer this. Let's create a bipartisan committee that will continue negotiations after the government reopens on reforms, ahead of next year's enrollment period, to provide long-term certainty that health care costs will be more affordable. This proposal reopens the government and ensures working families who are shopping right now for their health care get certainty and financial relief.
Yeah, so what you have here is just an admission from Democrats that this is a game. This is a game. Anybody with two brain cells to rub together can listen to what Chuck Schumer just said and say, wait, what? You want to extend the subsidies by 1 year. So basically, you want to do this again next year. Why do you want to do it again next year? Well, again, because next year, that's when the midterms are. Now, again, Democrats, you can argue successfully, have used this as leverage, right? The decision that they made to make the Obamacare subsidies expire during this time, in 2025, you can argue that, hey, that was successful. That helped them out, right, during this past election. So now they're trying to extend the subsidies for 1 year in order to do it again next year, which tells you what this, again, is all about. This is about winning elections. This is not about any type of long-term solutions. This is not about providing long-term relief to Americans or, protecting their health care long-term. It's not about that at all. Because if it was about that, then why are you doing it for 1 year? Why not 2 years? Why not 5 years? Why just a year? Because it's a game to them. They want to make the midterms about Obamacare, the subsidies, because they know, they see that people are getting letters in the mail saying that, hey, without these subsidies, your premiums are going to rise. Now, again, the reason why the premiums are rising really is because of the subsidies. But again, people, it's hard to explain that to normies, right? People aren't educated on this stuff. But that's all they know. That's what people know. And Democrats are taking advantage of people's ignorance on this and trying to use it as leverage against Republicans in order to win elections, to save their jobs. And this is the type of shit that pisses me off about politics. They play too many games with people's lives. And the funny part about this is that it's stuff like this that makes me really, really, really root for the GOP to just don't capitulate to these people at all. Let them continue to tell us and explain why you're going to keep the government shut down, right? Just keep explaining it, because the more they explain it, the more they talk about it, the more it becomes apparent that, hey, y'all playing games. That this is just about politics and it's not about what y'all say it's about. Even Charlamagne the God, aka Charlamagne the devil, even Charlamagne is calling out Democrats and telling them, hey, stop playing games, open up the government. People's lives are being affected by your games. Everybody can see that this is political for you guys.
Dems, you had a great night last night. The premiums have already gone up. They are set for the year. It's time to move on. We appreciate the fight, the valiant effort, but come on, man. People got rent due. Yeah. People got child care to pay for, light bills, card notes. I feel for all those federal workers who have missed 2 paychecks already, especially when most of them are living paycheck to paycheck. People not getting their SNAP benefits. It's time to reopen the government. I don't care whose fault it was. Let's stop playing politics with people's lives.
People mad at you for saying that. They feel like the Democrats should fight. But what's the reason you're saying the fight is over?
The fight is over because the premiums have already gone up and they're set for the year. And now you have a whole group of people, which are federal workers, who have already missed 2 paychecks. Mm-hmm. So I understand that, you don't want high health care premiums, but what about people who can't pay their rent right now? Mm-hmm. Right? About people who can't pay their car notes right now? People who can't pay their daycare? I don't care whose fault it is or was. Let's stop playing politics with people's lives, man. Let's reopen the government. We can still have this fight about health care while the government is open.
Yeah, if Charlamagne can see this, then I'm sure that if you're the average American and you're paying attention and you're not a complete and total Democrat Party shield, because I understand why Democrat Party shields are pretending as if this is Republicans' fault, right? But again, if you're the average person, right, you're not a complete and total partisan hack. If somebody like Charlamagne can see it, I'm sure that normal people can see it, right? And again, this is part of the reason why I think Republicans need to stick to their guns and just force Democrats to continue to explain to the American people, why is it that you only want these extensions for a year, right? Why only a year? Tell us, Democrats. Tell us why you only want it for a year, right? Because again, why would you want to put the American people through this again next year? It's about politics. And if that is what Democrats are going to do, right? If that's the message they're going to put out there, then I think that plays in favor of Republicans. Republicans clearly are not going to get on board with this because, again, everybody knows that this is a poison pill.
What is your response to Chuck Schumer's proposal here to keep those ACA benefits going for another year, bipartisan committee to work on those, and reopen the government with the clean CR?
God, please give me patience, because if you give me strength, I'm going to need bail money. What Senator Schumer is suggesting is that we do the dumbest thing possible that won't work. Stupid should hurt more. Senator Schumer says we should just extend the status quo for a year. What does that mean? That means that we would have to take $35 billion of taxpayer money and give it directly to the health insurance companies without any commitment of lowering premiums. How is that going to reduce health care costs? How's that going to reduce premiums? The health care companies are going to take $35 billion from the taxpayers and put it into their pockets. I mean, duh. I don't know what Senator Schumer is thinking. Earth to Chuck. Earth to Chuck. Am I going to vote for this? The short answer is no. The long answer is hell no. I think we're just going to have to get used to the fact that we've been in a shutdown. We're going to be in a shutdown for a while. I voted 14 times to lift the shutdown. The Democrats and Senator Rand Paul have voted 14 times to keep the government shut down. We're just going to be here for a while.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like what Senator Schumer just proposed is really any different than where Democrats have been all along. They wanted $1.5 trillion. You say $36 billion. I guess there's a lot of different numbers on this package. But to keep the Obamacare benefits were expanded during COVID. And of course, once you give something, very hard to claw it back. So that's where we are right now. And so the impact is of having that extension pulled away is making people's new health care benefits rise. But as you say, it's not fixing the problem in terms of lowering costs. Is there any, I just spoke with the former Governor Sununu, and he said, what they need to do is accept Senator Thune's next proposal and agree on it and get Democrats across the board on it. What do you think that is going to look like?
He's just going to bring up the same resolution that he's brought up 14 times. Look, if we've learned anything during this shutdown, we've learned that the Obamacare Affordable Care Act exchanges, they're not working. They're not lowering health care costs. Extending the status quo will just be putting fresh paint on rotten wood.
So
Why would we want to do that?
Excuse me. President Trump has a solution, and he talked about it again today.
President Trump does have a solution, and I want to talk about President Trump's solution because I think that under a very specific set of circumstances, does the solution that President Trump is proposing make sense and may be worth doing. But I'm going to talk about it. So without further ado, go ahead and roll this clip.
Remember, Republicans, regardless of the Schumer shutdown, the Democrats will terminate the filibuster the first chance they get. They will pack the Supreme Court of the United States, pick up 2 states, that's a lot of states, and add at least 8 electoral votes. Their 2 objectors are gone. Remember, Sinema and Manchin, they're gone. Don't be weak. Don't be stupid, Republicans. Fight, fight, fight. Win, win, win. We will immediately end the extortionist shutdown, get all of our agenda passed, and make life so good for Americans that these deranged Democrat politicians will never again have the chance to destroy America. They tried to destroy your country. Republicans, you will rue the day that you didn't terminate the filibuster. Be tough, be smart, and win. This is much bigger than the shutdown. This is the survival of our country. Terminate the filibuster, and let's live the great life that this country is capable of living.
I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. A Democrat is going to be elected in 2028. You know that. I know that. The Democratic president is going to announce a special transition advisory committee on the reform of the Supreme Court.
What do you think about that? Do you think that'll happen?
That's the president's warning on a filibuster. He's telling Republicans, do it now, change it now, because his warning is this is what Democrats are going to do, blow up the filibuster, change the number on the court, do the whole thing. There are a number of Democrat voices the last few years who have been saying this prominently. It's not just James Carville. We think about former Attorney General Eric Holder. A number of sitting lawmakers have said they want to change the makeup of the court. It's something I asked Justice Barrett about in a recent interview, and she said, listen, a lot of this stuff is set by the Constitution, but not all of it. Right. But judges should be free to do their jobs without worrying about political interventions.
So if the president's saying Democrats are going to blow up the filibuster if they win back Congress anyways, so Republicans might as well do it now, get the shutdown over with, and use it while you can.
Exactly. But as Senate Majority Leader John Thune said, the votes aren't there in my caucus. They all know what it's like to be on the minority and to only have that filibuster as your only tool, and they don't seem willing to give it up.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Republicans are opposed to getting rid of the filibuster. They're saying they don't have the votes. They're not going to do it under any set of circumstances. The president is saying you're going to regret doing that. You need to repeal the filibuster. He's talking about actually get rid of it altogether so that he can pass his agenda, which I understand where he's coming from. And I actually do believe that there is a very specific set of circumstances where repealing the filibuster in this current situation actually might make sense. Because generally speaking, I'm opposed to it because I know how useful it can be, right? When Democrats get back in power. Regardless, I do think that it would make sense to get rid of the filibuster only if Republicans, President Trump, can prove that they can actually mobilize GOP voters, mobilize people on the ground against Democrats, and to make sure that we have enough support in the midterms in order to guarantee that Democrats do not take back power and control. That is the only way that it makes sense to get rid of filibuster. What do I mean? Right now, Democrats are winning the optics battle. And part of the reason why is because the media lies to people. The way they cover Democrats and Republicans is different. When you talk about the shutdown, they basically make it seem like it's the Republicans' fault when it's actually Democrats' fault. Okay, so we're fighting an uphill battle, right? And that's the only reason why Democrats aren't really hurting as of right now. And I think the longer that this carries on, I think they will start to hurt because I think it's obvious to anybody, again, with just a basic understanding of the situation that Democrats are at fault. But my concern about overturning the filibuster comes from the fact that historically speaking, when politicians make big moves like that, the backlash is so great in the next election that the party in power or the party that made the changes happen, they get hurt, right? Like, for example, Democrats had a supermajority with Obamacare when they passed it in 2010. Because they passed Obamacare, the backlash was so great, the Democrats got wiped out for 10 years, right? I mean, you could argue that Democrats got wiped out for 10 years because of Obamacare, just because they passed Obamacare. And the same thing happens to Republicans. When Republicans, or the Supreme Court, right, overturn Roe v. Wade, which again is because of Republicans, because Republicans nominated conservative justices to the court, and they promised that they would do that. They've been working on it for decades. One of the biggest conservative victories, again, over the last few decades. That is the reason why there was no red wave during the midterms, because a bunch of Democrats and moderates got pissed off and they voted. And there was a red trickle, but no red wave. So usually when big changes like that happen, in the next election, the party responsible for those changes, they suffer. That is my biggest fear when it comes to repealing the filibuster, is that you're going to repeal the filibuster, and if people's lives don't materially get better because the economy doesn't get better, and I think that the economy will get better, but if Republicans repeal the filibuster, the backlash could be so great, depending on what they do after they repeal the filibuster, that it will be hard for them to overcome in the midterms because of how Democrats will use it against them, right? And again, we've already seen that voters are willing to show up in droves. There was high turnout because they hate Trump, right? They don't like Trump. So I think that if Republicans are actually going to move forward with repealing the filibuster, I doubt that they will. But I think what President Trump and the Republicans need to do in this situation is to turn the optics game against Democrats. Mobilize conservative voters against the Democrats in their shutdown. Get voters in Washington, D.C., hold rallies to open up the government and to pay the workers. Open up the government and pay the worker rallies. Hold rallies. Do the same thing Democrats do. Mobilize the voters. Get the voters out in the streets mobilizing against Democrats. Prove that we can actually get voters to support what the GOP is doing. And if that doesn't make the Democrats fold, if Democrats going into Thanksgiving, and I think that these rallies should be held right before Thanksgiving, if the shutdown is still going on, hold massive rallies to pressure Democrats to fold. And if they don't fold, then you hold massive rallies to repeal the filibuster. Prove to the American people that you can actually rally Americans, rally conservatives behind repealing the filibuster to open up the government and to pass President Trump's agenda. Because again, the risk of repealing the filibuster is that the backlash is going to be so great that you're going to get wiped out in midterms. However, if Republicans actually have the ability to rally voters behind something, to rally behind the agenda, say, hey, Democrats are obstructionists. They're just not willing to work with us at all. We want to pay the workers. We want to open up the government. We want to govern. Support us, right? If you can get people out in the street, mobilize them the same way the Democrats mobilize the voters with the No Kings riots, right? We make fun of the No King stuff, but let's be real. It works. It's effective for mobilizing people. If Democrats can get their boomer base out in the streets and to mobilize against Trump being a quote-unquote king, then President Trump and the Republicans got to mobilize voters to do the same damn thing. And that is the only circumstance that I think it actually makes sense to repeal the filibuster. Because if you can actually prove that we have the energy and that voters are actually going to vote, that Republicans are going to show up, and that conservatives are going to reward the Republicans for actually governing, for passing President Trump's agenda. Because what typically happens is that when you do big things in politics, again, the backlash is greater than the reward, right? Democrats didn't show up to reward Obama for passing Obamacare. Republicans showed up to punish him, though, but Democrats didn't show up to reward him. Same thing with Roe v. Wade. Republicans were not rewarded for Roe v. Wade being overturned, but Democrats punished Republicans for Roe v. Wade being overturned. So Republicans, if you're going to repeal the filibuster, which, again, generally speaking, I think is a bad idea, but if Democrats want to be so obstructionist that we have no choice, I believe that you should do it, but only if you can prove that you can mobilize voters, you can get that energy out in the streets that we can take into the midterms to make sure that we blow the Democrats out, that we destroy them in the midterms. And that after the filibuster is overturned, we're passing universal voter ID. We are restricting mail-in ballots. We're going to repeal Obamacare. Okay, we're going to replace it with a more free market-oriented system. We're getting rid of the special interest that are the reason why our healthcare costs continue to go up. Let's get some legislation going in order to lower the cost of living in this country, right? To make housing affordable in this country, to incentivize more production of housing. Let's actually get some legislation going, and let's get some energy behind it. Let's get some boots on the ground behind it. Let's get some rallies behind it. Then yeah, I say go for it. But if it's one of those things where it's just like, well, we're just going to get rid of it, but we don't have any energy, we have no guarantees that President Trump's agenda is actually going to get passed, that voters are going to rally behind this, and that we're going to show out like never before in order to protect our majority and to expand our majority to midterms, then it's not worth it. Because I'm telling you, if Republicans repeal the filibuster without the right energy, with no guarantees that President Trump's agenda will be passed, it is over. It's over, okay? Repealing the filibuster is the ultimate boom or bust. And if they decide to do it, which I highly doubt they will, it only should be done under the circumstances that we have the energy that we have the ability to mobilize voters to not only get behind that, but to get behind the agenda that will be passed as a result, and that voters are actually going to show out in the midterms and vote against the massive backlash that will come. It will come from the left. We know that Democrats can get their lunatics out to vote, but we got to get our people out to vote. That's the only way it makes sense. Other than that, high risk, low reward. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I just want to put it out there because there's a big debate about whether or not we should get rid of the filibuster. Look, I'm just saying under a very specific set of circumstances, if Democrats want to be obstructionists to the point where, again, they're carrying this on until Thanksgiving, get people in the streets. Mobilize in the streets first. Prove that we have real energy. Show the American people we're on their side. We're on the side of workers. We're on the side of open up the government. We're on the side of governing. Get the base out in the streets. Get the people out in the streets. And if you can do that and Democrats still don't cave, then yeah, go for it. But make sure we got the energy for it. Because if we do it, again, Democrats are going to try to make us pay. And we already know they have the ability to get their lunatics and the freaks out there in the streets against Trump. We got to have that same energy. It will be the midterm elections of our lifetime. There will be no more important midterm election than the next midterms if Republicans decide to get rid of filibuster. It will be a life or death midterm, right? For Republican Party. I'm very serious about this. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.